My name is Wilbur, 32 years old, and working as a software engineer in Boston. Family gatherings have always been a source of anxiety for me, especially with my sister Heather being the golden child. But nothing prepared me for the humiliation of being kicked out of her engagement party security, escorting me through manicured gardens while guests whispered. Little did they know 3 months later, they would be at my doorstep begging for my help. Before I dive into this family drama, let me know where you are watching from. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to toxic family members who only want you around when they need something. Growing up in a middle-class suburb of Chicago shaped much of who I am today, though not always in positive ways. Our family home on Maple Street looked perfect, from the outside white picket fence, neatly trimmed lawns, seasonal decorations that my mother Linda meticulously changed with each holiday. But inside those walls, the dynamic was painfully clear. My sister Heather was the star, and I was merely supporting cast. From our earliest years, the favoritism was undeniable. When I was 8, I won the regional science competition with a project on renewable energy that my teacher called extraordinary for his age. My parents promised to attend, but at the last minute, Heather had a dance recital. "You understand, right, Wilbur?" my mother said, patting my head. "Your sister needs our support. She gets nervous performing." I nodded and took the bus to my competition alone, clutching my poster board and fighting back tears. My father Richard worked as a bank manager, stern with everyone but Heather. For her 16th birthday, he surprised her with a brand new red Volkswagen Beetle, complete with a personalized license plate reading HTHR 16. When my 16th birthday arrived 10 months later, I received driving lessons and was told I could use the family's old Toyota when my parents did not need it. "Be grateful," my father said when I could not hide my disappointment. Most kids your age do not have any car access at all. Our bedrooms told the same story. Heather's room was regularly updated with the latest decor from teen magazines, fairy lights, expensive bedding sets, a vanity with professional makeup lighting. My room kept the same blue wallpaper from when I was 5, with furniture from garage sales that my mother would say had character. When I asked about repainting when I was 14, my mother sighed about budgets, though Heather's room had been redone twice in the previous year. Holidays amplified the disparity. Christmas mornings featured Heather opening piles of carefully selected gifts, brand-name clothes, the latest electronics jewelry. My stack was always smaller, practical items like socks, educational books, or gift cards to office supply stores. "You are the responsible one," my mother would say, as if this explained everything. "Heather needs more encouragement." Despite the lack of support, I excelled academically. I graduated valedictorian of my high school and was accepted to MIT with a partial scholarship. The day my acceptance letter arrived, I ran into the house bursting with pride. My parents were in the kitchen fussing over Heather, who had just been asked to prom by the quarterback. "That is nice," my father said, barely glancing at my letter. "But can we talk about it later? We need to budget for Heather's dress and limo." College marked my first taste of independence, though it came with financial struggle. My partial scholarship covered tuition, but little else. I worked 3 jobs: campus IT support during weekdays, waiting tables on evenings, and weekend shifts at a 24-hour convenience store. Meanwhile, Heather enrolled in a liberal arts college where my parents paid her full tuition apartment and gave her a monthly allowance. She changed her major 4 times before dropping out in her junior year, claiming college was stifling her creativity. Those years were brutal but transformative. Between exhaustion and instant ramen dinners, I discovered my talent for software development. By senior year, I had created a project that caught the attention of a tech startup in Boston. They offered me a position before graduation, and I accepted immediately, eager to put distance between myself and Chicago. Over the 8 years since, I built a career I am proud of. I worked my way up from junior developer to senior engineer at one of the most innovative companies in the industry. My apartment in Cambridge is modest but comfortable: exposed brick walls, large windows, and a small balcony where I grow herbs and tomatoes in the summer. I have savings, investments, and financial security that I built entirely on my own. Heather's path took different turns. After dropping out of college, she cycled through jobs at boutiques and restaurants, never lasting more than a few months. She lived rent-free with our parents until she was 27, when she moved in with a boyfriend who owned a gym. When that relationship ended, My parents paid the security deposit and first 3 months' rent on a luxury apartment she could not afford. 6 months later, they covered her rental debt when she was nearly evicted. Then Bradley entered the picture. 36 years old, bronze-tanned year-round with bleached teeth and a collection of designer watches, he swept into Heather's life at a charity gala she had attended with a friend. Bradley Harrington, real estate developer and self-proclaimed visionary entrepreneur. Within 2 months, Heather moved into his mansion in the most exclusive neighborhood of Chicago. My parents were ecstatic. Bradley comes from an excellent family, my mother gushed during one of our infrequent phone calls. He has connections everywhere. His summer home in the Hamptons was featured in Architectural Digest. What they either did not know or chose to ignore were the rumors that followed Bradley in business circles. Former partners who mysteriously lost everything in deals gone wrong. Promised properties that never materialized after investors had paid in full. Construction projects abandoned halfway, with subcontractors left unpaid. I heard these whispers through industry connections concerning patterns that made me uneasy. But when I gently tried to express concerns to my mother, she cut me off. "You have always been jealous of your sister's happiness," she said coldly. "Bradley is the best thing that has ever happened to Heather. Do not ruin this with your negativity." So I kept my distance and my concerns to myself, watching from afar as Heather's social media transformed into a showcase of luxury vacations, designer shopping sprees, and charity galas. My parents began appearing in these photos too, enjoying the reflected glow of Bradley's apparent wealth and status. The family I had always felt excluded from seemed to have found their perfect final piece. And it was not me. The thick cream envelope arrived on a Tuesday, my address handwritten in calligraphy that I immediately recognized as not Heather's hasty scrawl. Inside was an invitation on heavyweight cardstock, embossed with gold lettering. "Mr. and Mrs. Richard Wilson request the honor of your presence to celebrate the engagement of their daughter, Heather Marie Wilson, to Mr. Bradley James Harrington." The location was Bradley's estate date set for 3 weeks away. I stared at the invitation for a long time, conflicted emotions swirling. Part of me wanted to ignore it completely. Why subject myself to another family gathering where I would feel like an outsider? But a smaller, persistent voice whispered that this could be a chance for reconciliation, an opportunity to repair the fractures in our family before Heather started her new life. After 2 days of deliberation, I called my mother to RSVP. "Wilbur, I was beginning to think you would not respond," she answered, her voice unnaturally bright. "So you will be attending?" "Yes, I thought it would be nice to." "Wonderful. Now the dress code is formal, so you will need a proper suit. Not the navy one you wore to your cousin Sarah's wedding. It looked a bit cheap on the photos. Perhaps you could invest in something better quality." First impressions with Bradley's family are very important. I felt my jaw tighten. "My suit is fine, Mom." "Well, at least make sure everything is properly tailored. And do something with your hair before then. Bradley's family is very particular, and we want everything to be perfect for Heather's big day." The conversation continued in this vein for 15 minutes, a litany of instructions about how I should present myself to avoid embarrassing the family. Not once did she ask about my life, my work, or how I had been in the month since we last spoke. Despite my better judgment, I found myself at Nordstrom the following weekend, purchasing a new charcoal gray suit that cost nearly $2,000. The practical part of my brain screamed at the extravagance, but the wounded child in me still craved approval. I also spent hours selecting an engagement gift, finally settling on an artisan crystal decanter set that the saleswoman assured me was what all the sophisticated couples are registering for these days. The morning of the engagement party, I woke with a knot of anxiety in my stomach. I had taken a Friday off work and flown to Chicago the previous evening, checking into a hotel rather than staying with my parents as my mother had half-heartedly suggested. "The house will be chaotic with preparations," she had said, and I had seized the excuse gratefully. I took extra care getting ready, pressing my new suit, polishing my shoes to a mirror shine, even getting a haircut at the hotel's salon. The gift was professionally wrapped, a silver bow catching the light. Looking in the mirror, I hardly recognized myself, dressed up like a child in Sunday best, still seeking a nod of approval. The drive to Bradley's estate took 45 minutes through increasingly affluent neighborhoods until I reached a private road guarded by an imposing wrought iron gate. I gave my name to security, who checked a list before allowing me through. The driveway curved through manicured grounds past a man-made lake, with a fountain at its center, before revealing the house itself, a modern mansion of glass, stone, and steel that looked more like a luxury hotel than a home. Valets in red jackets waited to take cars. Behind them, staff directed guests toward the rear gardens where white tents had been erected. Everything screamed money, not old, understated wealth, but new, flashy affluence that demanded attention. My parents were greeting guests near the entrance to the main tent. My mother wore a designer dress and pale blue hair, freshly colored and styled. My father stood stiffly in a tuxedo, looking uncomfortable but proud. When they spotted me, their smiles tightened almost imperceptibly. "Wilbur, you made it," my mother said, air kissing near my cheek. "The new suit looks better, much more appropriate." My father offered a firm handshake. "Son, glad you could fit this into your schedule." Before I could respond, they had turned to welcome the next arrival with much more enthusiasm. A couple my father introduced as Bradley's godparents, apparently important in Chicago social circles. Left to my own devices, I placed my gift on a table already crowded with packages and headed toward the bar. The tent was filled with round tables dressed in white linen, elaborate floral centerpieces towering above each. A string quartet played softly in one corner, while uniformed servers circulated with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. I recognized few faces, a handful of relatives, and some of my parents' friends. Most guests were unknown to me, gathered in clusters of expensive clothing and jewelry, conversations punctuated with practiced laughter. I felt profoundly out of place despite my new suit and careful grooming. "You must be the elusive brother," a voice said beside me. I turned to find a woman in her early 40s, martini in hand, appraising me with interest. "I am Margaret, friend of Bradley's mother. I have heard surprisingly little about you." "That tracks," I said before I could filter my response. "I am not exactly the family showcase." Margaret's eyebrow arched. Refreshing honesty, rare in these circles. She nodded toward a group where Bradley held court, my sister draped on his arm like an accessory. "Quite the production, is not it? Bradley never does anything small." I murmured agreement, watching my sister. Heather looked beautiful, but somehow less like herself, designer dress, professional makeup, hair styled in an elaborate updo. She laughed at something Bradley said, the sound carrying across the space, slightly too loud, slightly too eager. "Word of advice," Margaret said, leaning closer. "Bradley's business associates by the Raw Bar. Best avoided unless you want to hear endless stories about how they are revolutionizing the property market." She rolled her eyes. "Though if you ask any actual questions about their methods, they get remarkably vague." As if on cue, I spotted Heather noticing me. She whispered something to Bradley, then made her way over, smile fixed in place. "Wilbur, you actually came," she exclaimed, embracing me briefly, careful not to disturb her dress. "And you brought a gift." "You should not have." "Congratulations, Heather," I said sincerely. "You look happy." "I am beyond happy. Bradley is." She glanced back at her fiancé with an expression that seemed more possessive than loving. "He is everything I ever wanted. You have to meet him properly. Come on." She practically dragged me across the tent to where Bradley was talking with a group of men in similar expensive suits. Up close, he was taller than I expected, with features that were handsome in a conventional, almost manufactured way. "Baby, this is my brother Wilbur," Heather announced. "The tech genius I told you about." Bradley turned, assessing me with a quick up-and-down glance that felt like evaluation. "The MIT grad," he said, offering a hand with several heavy rings. "Heather mentioned you work for. What was it, some app company?" "Meridian Technologies," I corrected. "We develop enterprise software solutions." Right. Good for you." He clearly had no interest in the details. "Listen, you should talk to my buddy Carson here. He is always looking for tech guys for his ventures." Carson, a red-faced man with the build of a former athlete gone soft, thrust a business card at me. "Always need coders who can execute. My last team was all talk, no delivery. Had to fire the lot of them. I am actually leading development on a new I began, but Bradley had already steered Heather away toward more important guests, his hand possessively on the small of her back. Carson and his friends lost interest in me almost immediately when they realized I was not looking for new opportunities. I retreated to the periphery of the party, nursing a scotch and observing the social dynamics. My parents fluttered around the important guests, their pride in this connection to wealth and status painfully obvious. As I contemplated making an early exit, a server approached with a seating card. "Dinner will be served in 10 minutes, sir. You are at table 14. The card in my hand confirmed it, table 14, the farthest from the head table where my sister Bradley and my parents would sit with the most distinguished guests. Instead, I would be with distant relatives and what appeared to be Bradley's workplace subordinates, the lowest tier of invitees deemed important enough for an invitation, but not for prime placement. The message was clear: I was here as an obligation, not as a valued family member. As I walked toward my assigned table, I caught my mother's eye across the tent. She quickly looked away, confirming that the seating arrangement was no accident. Table 14 was exactly what I had expected, a collection of obligation invites. Beside me sat my mother's cousin Ethel and her husband, whose name I could never remember, a junior colleague from Bradley's company with his visibly uncomfortable date, and my second cousin Amanda, whom I vaguely remembered from childhood family reunions. The conversation was stilted, limited to bland observations about the weather, the impressive venue, and how beautiful Heather looked. "So what do you do?" Wilbur Amanda asked after an awkward silence, poking at her appetizer, a tiny tower of seafood that looked more like art than food. "I am a software engineer," I replied, grateful for the attempt at real conversation. "Senior developer at Meridian Technologies in Boston." "Oh, my boyfriend works in tech too. Something with blockchains and crypto." She leaned forward with newfound interest. "Do you know Bradley well?" Heather has been so secretive about their relationship. "It all happened so fast." "Not really," I admitted. "This is only my second time meeting him. The first was very brief." "Well, he certainly knows how to throw a party," Amanda said, glancing around at the elaborate decorations and army of servers. "I heard the flowers alone cost more than my annual salary." The evening progressed through multiple courses of increasingly pretentious food. Tiny portions with elaborate descriptions delivered by white-gloved servers. From our distant table, we had a clear view of the head table, where Bradley held court, my sister gazing adoringly at him, while my parents beamed with pride. After the main course, Bradley stood and tapped his crystal champagne flute. The tent fell silent as he launched into a speech about finding his perfect match. When I met Heather, he proclaimed I knew she was exactly what I had been looking for. Beautiful, sophisticated, and from a wonderful family who raised her with the right values. End of say 9. He looked pointedly at my parents, who practically glowed under his approval. My sister's speech followed her voice higher and faster than normal, betraying her nervousness, addressing the high society crowd. "I want to thank my amazing parents," she gushed, "for always believing in me and supporting my dreams. You taught me to never settle for less than I deserve." She went on to thank Bradley's parents, his business associates, her friends, even the party planner. But my name never crossed her lips. As dessert was served, a deconstructed cheesecake that required instructions to eat, Amanda leaned closer again. "So what is the real story with Bradley? Is he really as successful as everyone says?" My dad mentioned something about some investors being unhappy with his last project. The question caught me off guard. For weeks I had bitten my tongue about the rumors surrounding Bradley's business practices. But something about being relegated to the outcast table, watching my family fawn over this man while pretending I barely existed, loosened my restraint. "I have heard some concerning things," I said quietly. "Nothing concrete, but there are rumors in business circles about investors losing money, construction projects abandoned midway. I would be careful about believing everything in the press releases." Amanda's eyes widened. "Really? That is not what Heather has been telling everyone. She said his last development was so successful, he is opening offices in 3 new cities." Maybe I shrugged. "But I know people who worked with his company who tell a different story. Just between us, I am a bit concerned about—" I never finished the sentence. Amanda had already pushed back her chair and was hurrying toward the head table, her expression eager. With dawning horror, I realized my mistake. Amanda had never been interested in conversation. She had been fishing for gossip, and I had handed it to her. I watched helplessly as she whispered in Heather's ear. My sister's head snapped up eyes, searching the crowd, until they locked on mine with such venom that I felt physically struck. She whispered something to Bradley, whose charming smile faltered, replaced by a cold calculation, as he too turned to look at me. The next few minutes passed in slow motion. Heather rose from her seat, Bradley's hand on her arm, in what appeared to be restraint, but was really guidance, steering her toward my table. My parents followed, confusion and alarm on their faces. "How dare you," Heather hissed when she reached me loud enough for nearby tables to fall silent and turn toward the unfolding drama. "How dare you spread lies about Bradley at our engagement party?" I stood aware of all eyes now fixed on us. "Heather, I did not. Do not lie to me." Her voice rose sharply. "Amanda told me everything. You are telling people Bradley's business is failing, that he scams investors. What is wrong with you?" By now, the entire tent had fallen silent, the string quartet awkwardly trailing off mid-composition. My face burned with humiliation. "I never said his business was failing," I said as calmly as I could. "I just mentioned I had heard some concerns from people in the industry." Bradley stepped forward, his practiced charm replaced by something harder. "You know, Wilbur, I tried to give you the benefit of the doubt." Heather said, "You have always been difficult, jealous, unable to celebrate her happiness. But spreading malicious rumors about my company crosses a line." My father moved beside Bradley, his face flushed with anger or embarrassment. "Perhaps both. What is this about, Wilbur? Are you trying to ruin your sister's special day?" "No, He has always been like this," my mother interrupted, placing a protective arm around Heather. "Always so negative. So critical of everything Heather does." I heard Bradley said, voice dangerously quiet, "that you have been asking questions about me to mutual acquaintances, digging for dirt. You should know. I have friends in many industries, including tech. One call from me could make your professional life very—" The threat hung in the air, blatant enough that several guests shifted uncomfortably. Yet no one spoke up. No one questioned why Bradley's first resort was to threaten my livelihood. "I think my father said, stepping forward, it would be best if you left, Wilbur. You have done enough damage." The words hit like a physical blow. "Dad, you cannot be serious. You are asking me to leave, instead of even hearing my side." "There is no side to hearing," Heather snapped. "You tried to ruin the most important day of my life because you cannot stand that I am happy and successful." I looked from face to face, my sister's fury, Bradley's cold calculation, my mother's embarrassment, my father's disappointment. Not one of them was interested in the truth. Not one considered that I might have legitimate concerns. In their narrative, I could only be the villain. "Fine," I said quietly. Dignity the only thing I had left. "I will go." "Congratulations on your engagement, Heather. I hope I am wrong about Bradley. I truly do." I turned to leave, but Bradley's voice stopped me. "Security will escort you out, just to make sure you do not decide to cause any more disruptions." Two men in dark suits materialized beside me, making it clear this was not a request. As they flanked me toward the exit, I heard my mother making excuses to nearby guests, something about my emotional problems, and how some people just cannot handle seeing others succeed. The walk through the tent past table after table of staring guests was the longest of my life. Outside, rain had started to fall, soaking through my expensive new suit, as the security guards watched me walk to my car. No umbrella offered no concern for the fact that I had been drinking and perhaps should not drive. My family's protection extended only to their reputation, never to my well-being. As I started the engine, I caught a glimpse of the mansion through the rain-streaked windshield lights, blazing music, resuming the celebration, continuing without missing a beat, once the embarrassing family member had been removed. The perfect metaphor for my entire relationship with my family. I drove back to my hotel in silence, rain matching the tears I refused to acknowledge were falling. The first week after the engagement party, I moved through life like a ghost. I returned to Boston and went through the motions at work, coding mechanically, attending meetings with forced attention. At night, I would lie awake replaying the humiliation, imagining all the things I should have said, all the ways I could have defended myself. Sleep became elusive food, tasteless. My phone buzzed regularly with messages I could not bring myself to read. Notifications showed snippets. How could you, from Heather, disappointed from my father, always been selfish from my mother? Each word a small dagger. I silenced all their conversations, but could not quite bring myself to block them entirely, that last thread of hope still unbroken. It was my colleague Darius who finally intervened. "Man, you look like hell," he said bluntly during our lunch break. "Whatever is happening, you need to talk to someone. And that someone is probably not me, because I am a software guy, not a feelings guy. But I know someone." The business card he slid across the table read Dr. Elena Patel, licensed therapist. I started to push it back, automatic denial ready on my lips. But Darius shook his head firmly. "Pride is expensive, Wilbur. Sometimes too expensive. Call her." 2 days later, I sat in Dr. Patel's waiting room, feeling both foolish and desperate. Her office surprised me, not the sterile clinical space I had imagined, but warm and comfortable with soft lighting and plants thriving on every surface. Dr. Patel herself was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a direct manner that somehow put me at ease. So she said after I had settled into an armchair, "Tell me what brought you here today." The story spilled out of me, not just the engagement party disaster, but everything that came before. The childhood of feeling invisible, the years of being compared and found wanting, the constant message that Heather's needs and wants would always supersede mine. As I spoke, Dr. Patel listened without judgment, occasionally asking questions that led me deeper into memories I had tried to bury. "What you are describing," she said, when I finally ran out of words, "sounds like a family dynamic with clear golden child and scapegoat roles. It is more common than you might think, but that does not make it any less painful or damaging." But why, I asked the question that had haunted me for decades. Why was I never enough? What did I do wrong? "Nothing," she said firmly. "Children do not create these dynamics. Parents do. Often it reflects their own unresolved issues or unfulfilled needs. Your role was assigned to you, not earned through any failing on your part." That first session broke something open inside me, a dam holding back years of hurt and confusion. I cried in my car afterward, deep, wrenching sobs that left me exhausted but somehow lighter. I committed to weekly therapy each session, another step toward understanding the family system that had shaped me and learning how to set boundaries that protected my self-worth. The process was painful but clarifying, like setting a broken bone so it could finally heal properly. Meanwhile, I made a conscious decision to rebuild other areas of my life. I had allowed work to become my entire identity, proof of my value, when family had offered none. But now I recognized the narrowness of that existence. I joined a weekend hiking group, rediscovering my childhood love of nature that had been set aside in the hustle of career building. On those trails, breathing mountain air and challenging my body in ways different from hunching over a keyboard, I found moments of pure presence that therapy had taught me to recognize as healing. Through the hiking group, I met Jessica, a graphic designer with wild curly hair and a laugh that demanded joining. Unlike the few women I had briefly dated in recent years, Jessica asked questions and actually listened to the answers. She shared her own stories of family complexity. A father who left when she was 12. A mother who did her best but struggled with depression. There was no pretense between us. No careful curating of image. Just authentic connection. "Tell me about your family," she asked on our fourth date over Vietnamese food in a tiny restaurant with plastic chairs and the best spring rolls in Boston. "That is a long, complicated story," I warned, prepared for her interest to fade. "I like long stories," she said simply, "and I have nowhere else to be tonight." So I told her, expecting judgment, or at least discomfort. Instead, she reached across the table and took my hand. "Thank you for trusting me with that," she said. "It explains a lot about you, all the good parts, like your resilience and empathy, but also why you apologize for things that are not your fault, and why you work so hard for recognition." Her insight, delivered without drama or pity, felt like being truly seen for perhaps the first time. At work, I found new purpose and focus. The project I had been developing, a security system that protected user data, while still allowing necessary accessibility gain traction with senior management. I was asked to lead a team implementing it company-wide, a promotion that came with both increased responsibility and recognition. "You have really turned a corner these past few months," my manager said during my review. "Your technical skills were always exceptional, but now you are showing leadership qualities we had not seen before. More confidence, more willingness to advocate for your ideas." I realized he was right. The constant need for approval that had made me hesitant to push back or stand firm was receding. In its place was growing a quiet confidence in my own judgment, my own worth, independent of external validation. As summer turned to fall, I found myself in a place I had never expected to reach content with my life, as it was not desperately seeking the approval I had been denied in childhood. My apartment, once just a place to sleep between work shifts, became a home. Jessica helped me select plants that thrived in the natural light art for walls that had remained bare for years, comfortable furniture that invited lingering rather than just functioning. "You are nesting," she teased one Saturday as we arranged bookshelves. "Next thing you know, you will be hosting dinner parties and joining a wine club." "Is that so terrible?" I asked, only half joking. "Not terrible at all," she said, standing on tiptoe to kiss me. "Just new. You are allowing yourself to put down roots, to belong somewhere." Dr. Patel noted the changes too. "You talk differently about yourself now," she observed during a session in late October. "There is less self-doubt in your language, less seeking of permission to take up space." "I feel different," I admitted. "Like I am finally the protagonist in my own life, not just a supporting character in everyone else's story." We had been discussing whether I should reach out to my family. Since the engagement party 4 months earlier, the communication had been one-sided messages from them that alternated between guilt-tripping and anger, none acknowledging any wrongdoing on their part. I had read them but not responded, a boundary Dr. Patel had supported as I worked through my own healing. "Whatever you decide about contact going forward should come from this stronger sense of self," she advised. "Not from obligation or guilt, but from what serves your well-being and honors your worth." I nodded, grateful for the guidance, but still uncertain. Part of me wanted to maintain the peaceful life I had built, free from the drama and pain of my family dynamics. Another part still hoped for reconciliation, for the possibility that they might eventually see me clearly and value me for who I was. What I did not expect was that the decision would be made for me. Just 3 days after that therapy session, on a rainy November evening, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. When I opened it, I found the last people I expected to see standing in my hallway, my parents looking nothing like themselves. For a moment, I thought I was hallucinating. My parents stood in my apartment doorway looking like strangers. My usually immaculate mother with unwashed hair and no makeup. My father's face gaunt and unshaven. Both wore rumpled clothes that looked slept in. "Wilbur," my mother said, her voice hoarse. "May we come in, please?" Still stunned, I stepped aside, allowing them into my apartment. They entered cautiously, like people entering unfamiliar territory, which I supposed it was. Neither had visited since I moved to Boston 8 years ago. "How did you find my address?" I asked, closing the door behind them. "Your company directory," my father said. "Online." They stood awkwardly in my living room, taking in the space, the bookshelves. Jessica and I had arranged the comfortable furniture, the large windows with their view of the city. For the first time, I saw my home through their eyes and felt an unexpected surge of pride. This was a space I had created, a life I had built without their help or approval. "Please sit down," I said, gesturing to the sofa. "Would you like some water, coffee?" They perched on the edge of the couch, my mother clutching her purse like a life preserver. "Water would be fine," she said. I went to the kitchen, grateful for the moment to collect myself. When I returned with glasses, my parents were whispering urgently to each other, falling silent as I approached. "So," I said, setting down the water, "what brings you to Boston? It is a long way to come unannounced." My mother glanced at my father, who cleared his throat. "Wilbur, we have a situation. A family emergency." "Are you ill?" I asked, genuine concern flaring despite everything. No, nothing like that," my father said quickly. "It is Bradley. And Heather, there has been a development. My mother's composure finally cracked. Bradley has been arrested. She blurted out, tears spilling over. The FBI raided his office 2 weeks ago. They are saying he was running some kind of investment scheme. A Ponzi scheme, they called it. The news hit me like a physical blow, not because it was entirely surprising the rumors I had heard made such an outcome seem possible, but because of what it meant for my family. The newspapers are calling it one of the largest fraud cases in Chicago history, my father continued, his voice hollow. Hundreds of investors affected. Millions of dollars missing. And Heather, I asked. Devastated, my mother said. Humiliated. She had no idea, Wilbur. You have to believe that. She is completely innocent in all this. I nodded, though I wondered if that was entirely true. Heather might not have known the technical details of Bradley's business, but she had willfully enjoyed its fruits without questioning their source. I am sorry to hear this, I said carefully. It must be very difficult for all of you. Difficult does not begin to cover it, my father said bitterly. The prosecutors have frozen all of Bradley's assets. And because your mother and because we invested substantially in his last development project, our accounts are temporarily frozen too. Potential evidence, they said. The picture was becoming clearer. How substantially did you invest? I asked. My parents exchanged glances. Our retirement savings, my mother admitted. And we took out a second mortgage on the house to increase our investment. Bradley promised returns of 18% annually. I fought to keep my expression neutral, though internally I was stunned by the recklessness. That does not sound like a realistic return, especially in real estate. We know that now. My father snapped, a flash of his old authority surfacing before deflating again. We wanted to believe in him, to be part of his success. The worst part is the social fallout, my mother continued. People we have known for decades are not returning our calls. The country club suggested we might want to pause our membership, as if we are somehow criminals too. Heather is absolutely crushed, my father added. All her friends, Bradley's friends, really have disappeared. The wedding has been called off, obviously. She had to move out of his house immediately after the arrest. She has been staying with us, but I prompted when he trailed off. My mother took a deep breath. But our situation is becoming precarious, Wilbur. With our accounts frozen and legal fees mounting, we need representation too to prove we were victims, not accomplices. We are running out of liquid assets. And the house. She choked slightly. We may lose the house. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken expectations. I waited, sensing there was more. Heather needs a place to stay, my father finally said. Somewhere away from Chicago, away from the gossip and the press, just until things settle. We thought. We hoped. You want Heather to stay with me, I finished for him. Just temporarily, my mother rushed to add. A few months at most. She can sleep on your couch. She will not be any trouble. I looked at them incredulously. Have you forgotten what happened at the engagement party? How you all treated me? How Heather and Bradley threatened my career? That was a misunderstanding, my father said dismissively. Emotions were running high. Surely you cannot hold a grudge about that now, given the circumstances. Besides, my mother added, you were right about Bradley all along. You should feel vindicated. I stood up, needing physical distance from their twisted logic. Vindicated. You think I wanted to be right about this? That I enjoy seeing my family in pain? Of course not, dear, my mother backpedaled. We just meant... I know exactly what you meant, I said. You meant that now that I have been proven right, I should forgive and forget everything that came before. All the years of being treated as less than Heather. All the support I never received. The humiliation of being thrown out of the engagement party. I should just let it all go because now you need something from me. We are family, Wilbur, my father said firmly. Family sticks together no matter what. Your sister needs you. We need you. The appeal to family obligation. The same obligation that had never seemed to apply when I needed support ignited something in me. But before I could respond, my phone chimed with a text message. Jessica, movie night still on bringing Thai food and that documentary you wanted to see. The message was a timely reminder of what I had built here. A life with genuine connections, based on mutual respect and care. Not obligation, not guilt, not conditional approval. I need some time to think about this, I said finally. I cannot give you an answer right now. But Heather, my mother began. We'll have to wait, I finished firmly. I have plans this evening, and this is not a simple request. I need to consider it carefully. My father looked like he wanted to argue, but seemed to realize he was not in a position to make demands. Fine. We are staying at the Marriott downtown. Room 712. We will wait for your call. As they prepared to leave, my mother turned back, her expression a mixture of desperation and calculation. Wilbur, there is one other thing. The legal fees. They are enormous. If you could perhaps help with those as well, just a loan until our accounts are unfrozen. Good night, Mom, I said, opening the door. Dad, I will call you tomorrow. After they left, I stood in my suddenly quiet apartment, emotions swirling. Anger at their audacity. Concern for their predicament. Satisfaction at finally standing my ground. Guilt at the satisfaction. When Jessica arrived an hour later, I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, her expression thoughtful. What are you thinking of doing? She asked when I finished. I do not know, I admitted. Part of me wants to help because they are still my family despite everything. Another part feels like this is just another version of the same pattern. Heather creates problems everyone expects me to sacrifice to fix them. Jessica nodded slowly. Those are both valid perspectives. But Wilbur, the real question is, what boundaries do you need to protect your own well-being? Helping family is one thing. Being used by them is another. What would you do? I asked. It is not about what I would do, she said gently. It is about what serves your healing, your growth. Dr. Patel has been helping you find your voice. What is that voice telling you now? I considered her question seriously. It is telling me that I cannot just say yes to everything they want. That would be falling back into old patterns. But I also cannot just turn my back when they are in genuine need. Then maybe there is a middle path, Jessica suggested. A way to offer help that maintains your boundaries and dignity. That night after Jessica left, I sat on my balcony looking out at the city lights, thinking about family, both the one I was born into and the one I was creating through chosen connections. By morning, I knew what I needed to do. I called my parents and arranged to meet them not at their hotel or my apartment, but on neutral ground, a quiet coffee shop near the Boston Public Garden. And I called Dr. Patel to schedule an emergency session before that meeting, knowing I would need her guidance to navigate this crossroads with clarity and strength. The coffee shop I chose had large windows overlooking the public garden, soft instrumental music playing in the background, and enough space between tables for privacy. I arrived 30 minutes early, securing a corner table and ordering a cappuccino to steady my nerves. The session with Dr. Patel that morning had been invaluable. Remember, she had said this meeting is not about winning or punishing. It is about speaking your truth and setting clear boundaries. Their reaction to those boundaries is information about them, not a reflection on you. I had written down key points I wanted to make, knowing that in emotional moments important thoughts could slip away. The notepad sat in my pocket now, a tangible reminder of my preparation. My parents arrived precisely on time, looking marginally better than they had the previous day. My mother had applied makeup, my father had shaved. They approached the table with visible apprehension. Thank you for meeting us, Wilbur, my father said as they sat down. Have you reached a decision? Is Heather joining us? I asked, noticing her absence. She is back at the hotel, my mother explained. She is not in a good state right now. The stress of everything. I nodded, unsurprised. Before we discuss any decisions, I want to be clear about something. I am willing to help, but not unconditionally. Not without addressing the patterns that have defined our family relationship for as long as I can remember. My father frowned. Wilbur, this is hardly the time for. It is exactly the time, I interrupted firmly. Because if we do not address these issues now, we will just repeat the same dynamics. And I am not willing to do that anymore. Something in my tone must have conveyed my resolve, because for once my father fell silent. My mother glanced between us nervously. What patterns, she finally asked, her voice small. I took a deep breath. The pattern where Heather's needs always come first, where I am expected to sacrifice without question, while she receives endless support and second chances, where my accomplishments are minimized while hers are celebrated, where I am criticized for being practical and responsible, the very qualities you insisted I develop. That is not fair, my mother protested weakly. We love both our children equally. Do you? I asked, meeting her eyes directly. When was the last time you called me just to ask how I was doing? When was the last time you visited Boston before yesterday? When I graduated valedictorian from high school. Dad, you barely looked at my acceptance letter to MIT because you were focused on Heather's prom dress. My father shifted uncomfortably. That was years ago, Wilbur. You cannot hold on to every perceived slight forever. It is not about holding on to slights, I said. It is about recognizing patterns. When I was struggling through college, working 3 jobs to make ends meet, you were fully funding Heather's education and giving her spending money. When I wanted to renovate my childhood bedroom, there was no money in the budget, but Heather's room was redecorated multiple times. When I raised legitimate concerns about Bradley's business practices, I was thrown out of the engagement party. These are not isolated incidents. They are evidence of a consistent family dynamic. A heavy silence fell over the table. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a napkin while my father stared out the window, jaw tight. We never meant to make you feel less valued, my mother finally said. Heather just needed more support. She was more fragile. She was allowed to be fragile, I corrected. I was not. And now once again Heather is in crisis. And the expectation is that I will set aside everything, including the pain of how I have been treated, to come to her rescue. What are you saying? My father asked, an edge to his voice. That you will not help your own sister when she is down. I am saying, I replied carefully, that I am willing to help, but not in the way you are asking. I will not let Heather move into my home. That would not be healthy for either of us, given our history. And I will not simply hand over money for legal fees without any accountability or recognition of the past. Then what? My mother asked, desperation creeping into her voice. What are you offering? I reached into my pocket and placed a business card on the table. This is the contact information for a family therapist here in Boston. One who specializes in family systems and healing damaged relationships. I am willing to pay for family therapy sessions for all of us, including Heather. That is my offer. My parents stared at the card as if it might bite them. Therapy, my father repeated incredulously. That is your solution. We need practical help, Wilbur. Not psychological nonsense. The practical problems you are facing now are the direct result of emotional and relational patterns, I said calmly. Heather was drawn to Bradley because she has been conditioned to seek external validation and status. You invested your retirement savings in his scheme because you wanted to be part of that glamorous world. These are not just financial issues. They are about what we value and how we relate to each other. This is ridiculous, my father scoffed. We came to you for real help, and you are offering, what, family counseling? Yes, I said simply. Because that is what we actually need. As for practical matters, I am happy to help Heather find an affordable apartment in Boston and connect her with job opportunities in my network. I will contribute to a fund for your legal fees, provided I have oversight of how that money is used. But I will not enable the continuation of unhealthy patterns by just writing blank checks or opening my home without addressing the underlying issues. My mother's face crumpled. Wilbur, please. Heather is devastated. She needs her family now more than ever. I am still her family, I said gently. But being family does not mean sacrificing my own well-being or dignity. It does not mean pretending the past did not happen. Real support means helping each other grow and heal, not just bailing each other out of crises. And if we refuse this, therapy, my father asked, nearly spitting the last word. Then I wish you well, but I cannot be part of the solution you are seeking, I replied steadily. My boundaries are not negotiable on this. The silence that followed was heavy with decades of unacknowledged pain and imbalance. My mother wept quietly while my father struggled visibly with anger and disbelief that his authority was being challenged. After what felt like an eternity, a new voice broke the tension. He is right. We all turned to see Heather standing a few feet from our table, eyes red-rimmed but clear. None of us had noticed her enter the coffee shop. Heather, my mother gasped. What are you doing here? I thought you were resting at the hotel. I followed you, she admitted, pulling out a chair to join us. I needed to hear what Wilbur would say. Without me influencing things. She turned to me, meeting my eyes directly for what felt like the first time in years. You are right about everything. About Bradley. About how this family works. About me being the favorite. Her voice broke slightly. I always knew it, Wilbur. I knew I got special treatment. And I never said anything because it benefited me. Because it was easier to accept the favoritism than to question it. My parents looked stunned by this admission. Heather, that is not my father, began. It is true, Dad, she interrupted. You know it is. You and Mom always made excuses for me. Always cleaned up my messes. Always made sure I had the best of everything. And look where it got me. Engaged to a criminal. No real career. No actual skills to fall back on. 30 years old. And completely dependent on my parents, because I never had to learn independence. Tears streamed down her face now, but she made no move to wipe them away. The worst part is what we did to Wilbur. What I did to him. Making him the outsider in his own family. Letting him be thrown out of my engagement party when he was the only one with the courage to see the truth about Bradley. I sat in stunned silence, never having expected this acknowledgement from my sister. For years I had resigned myself to being the only one who saw our family dynamic clearly. I will do the therapy, Heather said, looking at the business card still on the table. I need it more than anyone. And I do not want to stay with you, Wilbur, not because I do not want your help, but because you are right. It would not be healthy for either of us right now. She turned to our parents. And we should not be asking for money without being willing to address how we have treated him all these years. My mother's tears flowed freely now. My father sat rigidly, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles had turned white. I do not know if I can do. Therapy, he said finally, the word still awkward in his mouth. At my age, talking about feelings and all that. Then I will go alone, Heather said with surprising firmness. And Mom can decide for herself. But I am done pretending everything is fine when it is not. I am done being part of the problem. In that moment, looking at my sister, I saw something I had never seen before, the first glimmers of genuine self-awareness and accountability. Not complete, not perfect, but real. I have a friend who works in graphic design, I said to Heather. Her company might be hiring administrative staff. It would be an entry-level position, but it is a start. And there is a reasonably priced apartment building near my office that has units available. I can help you with the security deposit if you commit to finding work. Thank you, she said quietly. That is more than I deserve after everything. My father cleared his throat. And the legal fees your mother and I still need help with. Richard, my mother interrupted, surprising all of us. Wilbur has made his position clear. And he is. He is not wrong. She turned to me, her expression pained, but sincere. We have not been fair to you, Wilbur. I see that now. I cannot say I understand everything you are feeling, but I am willing to try. I will attend the therapy sessions. My father looked between his wife and children, a man watching the foundations of his world shift beneath him. I need time to think about all this, he said finally. But I will consider the therapy. for the family. It was not a complete victory, not a perfect resolution. But as we sat in that coffee shop, the four of us truly seeing each other perhaps for the first time, I felt something long knotted inside me begin to loosen. Not forgiveness exactly, that would take time and evidence of real change, but the possibility of a new beginning. A family relationship built on truth rather than illusion, on mutual respect rather than assigned roles. "Thank you for hearing me," I said simply. "That is all I have ever really wanted." 2 weeks after our coffee shop confrontation, I sat in the waiting room of Dr. Marissa Goldstein's office, the family therapist whose card I had given my parents. The walls were painted a calming sage green with comfortable seating arranged to encourage conversation. Soft instrumental music played from hidden speakers, presumably to mask the voices from the therapy rooms beyond. Heather arrived first looking different than I had ever seen, her minimal makeup hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, wearing jeans and a sweater rather than her usual designer outfits. She had found an apartment in Brighton, modest but clean, and had interviewed for the administrative position at Jessica's design firm. "I am nervous," she admitted, taking the seat beside me. "I have never really done therapy before. Bradley suggested couples counseling once, but he canceled after the therapist suggested he might have control issues." She laughed shakily. Red flag number 47 that I chose to ignore. "Therapy is just conversations," I reassured her. "Difficult ones sometimes, but just talking." "I am more worried about Dad," she confessed. "He has been so quiet since Boston. Mom says he sits in his study for hours just staring at nothing." Our parents arrived moments later, my mother with a determined expression, my father looking uncomfortable in the therapy environment. He nodded stiffly at me, but said nothing, as we were called into Dr. Goldstein's office. That first session was awkward and halting. Dr. Goldstein explained the process, emphasized confidentiality, and asked each of us to share what we hoped to gain from therapy. My mother spoke of wanting to repair family bonds. Heather mentioned needing to understand patterns she kept repeating. My father said little beyond wanting to sort things out. When my turn came, I spoke honestly about seeking acknowledgement of past hurts and building healthier relationships going forward. We left that day with homework, individual reflections on specific childhood memories from each of our perspectives. I wondered if my father would actually complete the assignment, or if this would be our first and last family session. To my surprise, everyone returned the following week. And the week after that. The sessions were often painful, revealing layers of family dysfunction deeper than even I had recognized. My father's own childhood under a hypercritical father who withheld approval. My mother's fear of conflict leading her to enable unhealthy dynamics. Heather's terror of disappointing anyone, driving her toward men like Bradley, who promised to elevate her worth through external success. By the fifth session, we had our first breakthrough. My father, in halting words, acknowledged that he had treated his children differently. "I saw myself in Wilbur," he admitted. "The serious one. The responsible one. And I thought being hard on him was preparing him for life, because no one prepared me." His eyes, when he looked at me, held genuine remorse. I was wrong. I confused preparation with deprivation of support. I am sorry, son." Those words, simple but never before spoken, affected me more deeply than I had anticipated. They did not erase decades of hurt, but they created space for something new to grow. Meanwhile, outside of therapy, practical matters progressed. Heather got the job at the design firm, starting in client relations, her social skills finding constructive application. My parents downsized from their large house to a townhouse, reducing their mortgage substantially. With their accounts unfrozen, once investigators confirmed they were victims rather than accomplices, they began rebuilding their financial stability, albeit with far more modest expectations. I maintained my boundaries throughout this process. I contributed to a legal defense fund, rather than paying their lawyers directly. I helped Heather with job leads, but not with daily expenses. I attended therapy faithfully, but limited family interactions to those sessions for the first 2 months, needing that structure to avoid falling back into old patterns. Jessica remained my steadfast support, offering perspective when I needed it, and space when I felt overwhelmed. "I am proud of you," she told me, after a particularly difficult session, where my mother had finally acknowledged how her enabling had hurt both her children in different ways. Not just for standing up for yourself, but for offering a path to healing rather than just walking away. 6 months after my parents first appeared at my door, I hosted Thanksgiving dinner in my apartment. A year earlier, such an event would have been unimaginable, my family in my space, breaking bread together without the weight of unspoken resentment suffocating us all. Yet here we were, an imperfect but improving family, seated around my dining table with Jessica completing our circle. The conversation still had awkward pauses. My father sometimes retreated into silence when emotions ran high. My mother occasionally slipped into old habits of glossing over tensions. Heather still sought approval too eagerly, and I still braced for dismissal when sharing my thoughts or feelings. But there were new patterns emerging alongside the old. My father asked about my work with genuine interest. My mother mentioned a book she had read about family dynamics, suggesting she was continuing to learn outside of therapy. Heather spoke with pride about managing her own budget for the first time in her life, and I found myself able to share memories of feeling excluded without the crushing weight of unresolved anger. After dinner, as we gathered in the living room with coffee and pie, my father cleared his throat. "I want to say something to all of you." He began, uncharacteristic uncertainty in his voice. "These past months have been difficult, humbling. At my age, you think you know yourself, your life. You think you have done your best." He paused, gathering himself. "But I have learned that my best was flawed, deeply flawed. I created a family where one child was placed on a pedestal and the other was left to prove his worth over and over. That was wrong." The room fell silent, all of us aware of the significance of this admission from a man who had built his identity on being right, on knowing best. "I cannot undo the past," he continued. "But I want both my children to know that I am proud of you. Wilbur, your strength and integrity in how you handled our crisis showed me the man you have become despite my failures as a father. And Heather, your courage in facing your own part in our family patterns gives me hope for your future." My mother reached for his hand, her eyes wet. "We both failed you in different ways," she added. "And we are both committed to doing better for however many years we have left." To new beginnings, Jessica offered, raising her coffee cup in a toast. And to hard-earned wisdom, I added, meeting each of their eyes in turn. Later that night, after everyone had left and Jessica and I were cleaning up, she asked me, "How do you feel, really?" I considered the question carefully. Cautiously hopeful, I said finally, "This is not a fairy tale ending. We have years of entrenched patterns to overcome. Dad still struggles to express emotions. Mom still tries to smooth over difficult truths sometimes. Heather is just beginning to build an independent identity. And I still have moments of that old hurt and anger." But Jessica prompted, knowing there was more. "But I also feel peace with my decision," I continued. Setting boundaries did not mean cutting them off. It meant creating conditions under which healthier relationships might be possible. I do not know if we will ever be the kind of close family you see in holiday movies, but we are becoming a family based on truth rather than illusion. And that feels right. Jessica wrapped her arms around me, resting her head against my chest. "That is the thing about real families," she said softly. "They are always works in progress, always imperfect. The question is whether they are growing or stagnating." As I held her, looking out at the city lights beyond my windows, I reflected on the journey of the past year. From the humiliation of being escorted from Heather's engagement party to hosting my family for Thanksgiving in my own home, from silent suffering to speaking my truth, from resignation to boundaries, I had learned that family is not just about blood ties or unconditional sacrifice. It is about mutual respect and genuine care, about seeing each other clearly and still choosing connection, about holding each other accountable while allowing space for growth and change. Most importantly, I had learned that standing up for myself was not an act of selfishness or cruelty, but an act of integrity and ultimately love for myself and for my family. By refusing to participate in unhealthy dynamics, I had offered us all a chance at something better. The road ahead would not be easy. Real change never is. There would be setbacks, old patterns resurfacing, new challenges to navigate. But for the first time in my life, I faced that future without the weight of unacknowledged pain dragging me down. I faced it standing firmly in my own worth, surrounded by relationships, both family and chosen, built on honesty rather than obligation. Sometimes the greatest act of love, both for yourself and others, is having the courage to say no when you have always been expected to say yes. Real family is not about unconditional sacrifice. It is about mutual respect and genuine care. I finally understand that I deserve both. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who only seemed to value you when they needed something? Share your experience in the comments below. Remember to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you, and hit that notification bell so you never miss another video. How would you have handled this family situation? Let me know your thoughts. And thank you for listening to my Creed story. Wishing you the strength to stand in your truth no matter how difficult the conversation.